Welcome to the God and Golf Podcast, where Jesus is always first. It's your host again, Scott Weiss, PGA Specialized Professional in Coaching and Teaching, as well as a Christian minister. If you want to know how this podcast came to being and how it all got its start and why I'm doing this, you can back up and go to the very second podcast on the list where it has the introduction to the God and Golf Podcast, and you can hear a little background on it. I am enjoying bringing these episodes to you. I am praying that it is helping you in your golf game. I'm praying that it is helping you in your life as a Christian, and I'm praying if you aren't a Christian that it's making you consider and think about your purpose for being on this earth, and why are we here, and what is my ultimate purpose. And it's no question that the most important thing that you will ever do in this life is pursue God, to have a relationship with the Creator, the one that formed you, the one that made you. We'll talk about that a little bit more today. Today's episode, again, we're just kind of walking through these episodes and taking them as they come. They don't always follow the exact same format. Some are a little bit different than others. But ultimately, I'm talking about a subject that pertains to golf, and then I'm talking about that subject and how it pertains to a life of following Jesus. Obviously, there's no question that I believe and teach that Jesus Christ is the eternal God that has come down to this earth in the form of a man, a sinless man, who walked this earth and went about doing good and gave us a perfect example. And I talked to you also in that introduction about why golf is God's favorite sport. Now, I do that a little tongue-in-cheek. Hopefully you're catching a little bit of my sense of humor as we go through this. So in today's episode, I want to get right into talking about myths and science, falsely so-called. If you looked up right now online and you would put in maybe golf myths or myths in the golf business, you would come up with quite a few that would be consistent throughout each article or each video that you watched, describing things that are thought about or things that are basically myths. People think this happens. People think this is why it should be. People think this is what should be going on, when in fact it's not accurate at all. But I've got my own little list of myths that I've encountered that I want to share with you. Probably the most common one that you'll see all over the website is keep your head down. That has done more harm by far than it's done good. Because I'll see people make a golf swing and they have been told over and over and over to keep their head down. And so instead of following through, instead of finishing up on their lead leg, instead of letting the club, go through the ball and then, no, they're back on their back foot. If you're going to be a good ball striker and if you're going to do anything halfway decent in golf, you have got to get your pressure in your front foot. You've got to get weight on that front foot at impact. And so many golfers, the vast majority, do not have enough weight or pressure in their front foot at the point of contact. And so keeping the head down actually prohibits that from happening accurately. But also there's the concept of keep the head down. Well, you can't keep your head down if your whole upper body is lifting up. And you can't keep your upper body from lifting up if your hands are scooping in at the ball. So the reason that people can't keep their head down is because they have to lift up their upper body to make room for the club to come through. Otherwise, they would hit 7 or 8 inches behind the ball because people are doing what we call casting or scooping or an early release where the club would hit the ground behind the ball if their upper body didn't come up. So the real issue is not keeping your head down. The real issue is learning what the correct position is for your hands at impact so that you can maintain your spine angle and stay over the ball. So stop worrying about the keep your head down kind of thing. Worry more about what is happening at impact. So another thing, anyway, that's just a quick thing. That's really common. I just want to mention that. But one thing that I hear all the time, and I used to actually have this thought in my mind as an instructor, was that practice makes perfect. And obviously, I realized long ago that practice does not make perfect. And what I would say instead of practice makes perfect is that practice makes better. And then I went from practice makes perfect to practice makes better. And then I realized that wasn't accurate either. It had to be perfect practice makes better. And that's where I am today. Perfect practice makes better, but I can also tell you practice makes permanent. We are working so hard to change the neural pathways in our brain to create a new swing. Why not make sure all that hard work is actually doing the job? And why not make sure that what you're learning is the right thing to be learning? And so I love when my students come to me, or that's why I have an app that I can communicate with my students with. That's why when my students come in at the PGA Tour Superstore and they go to the back practice and play area, I want to know when they come in so I can go make sure what they're practicing is correct. The last thing I want them to do is be grooving bad habits, because practice makes permanent. Now, along with that same myth that, practice makes perfect, that's a total myth. Practice makes permanent, and I like to say perfect practice makes better, because nobody's going to get perfect, and you're not going to get better if you're not practicing correctly. So along with that is like, okay, well, I've got to practice so I can develop muscle memory. And it is amazing to me how many golf pros and teachers and people a lot smarter than I say muscle memory. There is no such thing as muscle memory. Okay, I'll say that again. There's no such thing as muscle memory. Memory occurs one place in your body, and it's in your brain. Do your ligaments have memory? Do your cartilages have memory? Do your bones have memory? None of them have memory. The memory, every single physical action that you've ever performed in your life has been controlled and ordered by your brain. Your brain orders body movement, and your body responds to the command of the brain. That's where memory is. You can learn so much faster today understanding that it's your brain which controls the activity of your body. In the old days, we would hit hundreds and hundreds and into the thousands of golf balls thinking, I'm going to get my muscles to memorize this pattern. Well, we have so many more mental techniques today and understanding how to talk to ourselves and to visualize in order to cut down the learning time. So no, muscles don't have memory. Your brain has the memory, but your muscles develop habits, and that is because of the neural pathways in your brain. Just hitting a few myths today about practice and about memory. I want to get on another myth too, which I'm telling you is going to be controversial, and some people might disagree with this. And there's no question in my mind, the most neglected part of club fitting is the proper grip size. I have heard and seen and witnessed so many fittings where they just automatically assume the person needs a standard size grip. And in the golf industry, it is my conclusion that almost everyone's grips are too small. I have wanted the standard grip size to actually be a mid-size and the women's standard to be a men's standard today. If you go into any store, any pro shop, I'd probably 75 to 80% of all the gloves sold are going to be medium large, large, extra large, or double extra large. And we've got this little bitty tiny round grip that all these big-handed people are holding, and it's causing increased tension in their forearms. There is a myth that a grip that is too small will cause you to flip the club through and cause you to hook the ball. I'll just tell you, one of my proudest moments, I was in a seminar with 9 PGA professionals on club repair and club fitting at a famous school in the United States that teaches these type of things. And the teacher said, this guy had 45 years of experience building clubs, club repair, being a golf professional. And he said, how many of you think a grip too small produces a hook or something that goes to the left? And 8 out of the 9 guys in there raised their hand. And I did not, because I had come to the conclusion that a grip that's too small causes tension. Tension is your biggest enemy in golf. And if my hands are squeezing tight and I've got tension in my forearms, then I'm not going to roll my arms. My muscles are not going to perform at their best because there's tension there. So I disagreed, and he saw that I didn't raise my hand. He goes, "Why aren't you raising your hand, Scott?" And I said, "Well, I don't believe that." And he goes, "Well, why is that?" I said, "I think a grip that's too small actually produces a shot that leaves the club face open." Everybody kind of turned and looked at me because I was the only one that had that conclusion. And after explaining physiology and muscles, the guy agreed with what I said. I hope you will too. Make sure that your grip is filling your hand. I wear a medium large glove and I use jumbo grips. I know that Bryson DeChambeau and John Daly are out there talking about everybody's grip being too small, and I completely concur with them. We've got it. We've got grips that are moving in people's hands at the top of their swing. We've got people squeezing way too hard because the club is not filling their hands. Now, what in the world is more important than the grip in the fundamentals of golf? I mean, it's the only thing that touches the club. Your grip, in my opinion, is the most important fundamental. You could have a great swing and have a terrible grip. You're going to have a bad result. The grip is going to allow you to present the club face to the ball in the correct manner if your grip is proper. So spend more time talking about your grip. There's so many myths. I don't want to get into them all today. I just wanted to hit a few. Keep your head down myth, the practice, makes perfect myth, the muscle memory myth, and the myth that a small grip is going to make you hook the ball or have a closed club face. And I'll tell you, this is my last one, maybe my favorite. I'm on the golf course so often with my students now. This will be my 6th year where I'm on the course teaching in a group environment with guaranteed results. And I'll hear my students' explanation of why they just hit a bad shot. Or something will happen and they'll be quick to say, "Oh, this is what I did." And they're almost never right. They're almost never correct. When you don't have knowledge of the golf swing, you don't understand ball flight laws and things that happen and how important the face angle is and face control, and they've heard all these crazy videos on YouTube and all the reels on Instagram and Facebook, and they've got so much contradictory information out there, and they think that they know what they're doing wrong, and they're never right. "Oh, I did that because of this," and I just shake my head. And usually I don't get into it at that point. Sometimes I do. But I'm seeing what they're doing wrong, and their evaluation of what they did wrong is just completely inaccurate. Without instruction, they're working on something that they don't need to work on, and they're trying to improve something that is not the cause of their problem. You cannot see you, okay? We're all searching for an invisible golf swing. You can't see you, and so you need a trained eye to say to you, "Hey, what did you just feel on that last shot?" And they say, "Oh, that felt weird." And I'm over here. That's exactly what you need to feel, because all swing correction, no matter what your predominant learning mode is, are going to be corrected by feel, what you felt, where you thought things were going on. And you think this, the number one thing people say when they see themselves on video is, "I didn't know I was doing that. I had no idea I was doing that." Because you can't see you. What you feel is not real. So it's just amazing to me how many people will evaluate their swing, evaluate their bad shot, evaluate their bad putt, evaluate their bad chip, and then say what they did wrong, and it's not the correct answer. However, when people start getting instruction, that changes. They start learning, and their golf IQ increases. Now they can properly evaluate their mistakes or get good feedback from every single shot as opposed to just dismissing things. So there you have it, some golf myths. We could go on and on about that, but those are mine, and somebody may disagree with that, and that's fine. What are some myths pertaining to Christianity or to God? Well, there's a bunch of them, but I just want to talk to you about one. And today, I believe it is the biggest myth and the largest worldwide propaganda that has ever been distributed. The word science appears twice in the Bible. The first time it appears, it's in the book of Daniel, chapter 1 and verse 4. When Daniel and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego were going to be taken into captivity by King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. And it made the statement about those 4 young men. They were skillful in all wisdom and cunning, in knowledge and understanding science. Here it was a very positive word. Science was used as a positive quality. Now the second time the word science appears in the Bible, it's in 1 Timothy 6:20. And it says, O Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust, avoiding profane and vain babblings and oppositions of science falsely so called, which some professing have erred concerning the faith. Paul closes his epistle to Timothy with this strong warning about science falsely so called. So he didn't warn about science, but he warned about science falsely so called. In other words, things that were coming off as science weren't actual science. And that is exactly what's going on with the biggest movement in the world today, which is the theory of evolution. Now, I hope you keep listening to this, because I am here to talk to you about the biggest lie perpetrated in our world. And some of you right now maybe are totally eyes wide open, ears real wide open, thinking this guy is off his rocker, he doesn't know what he's talking about. But I'm here to tell you that the biggest lie perpetrated in the world today is evolution. And it's so commonly accepted as fact, nobody questions it. But it is not in any way, shape, or form science. Let's sum this up. There are 2 theories about how we came into existence that dominate the world. The one theory is that man evolved over billions of years, maybe millions of years, from eventually that became an ape-like being, and then man evolved, and that we were all hunters and gatherers, and that we were cavemen, and we all this came from a single cell, which happens to. The whole concept is unbelievably lacking of any type of evidence whatsoever. But yet it is on science channels, it is on TV, it is all over the internet, it's over every book you read, it's over every newscast. People are saying evolution, just assuming in everyday conversation that we evolved from ape-like beings. If you look up at any definition of the word science, it will be something along the lines of it is verifiable, it is repeatable, it is observable, it is something that you can do today that you can do tomorrow. It is something that is consistent. It is something that if I take 2 parts of hydrogen and 1 part of oxygen, I'm going to get water. If I do that today, I can do it tomorrow. I can verify it, I can repeat it, I can observe it. The creation of this earth and the creation of this world is not science. We cannot study it and verify it or repeat it or observe it. So we have a theory of evolution. We have one theory of how things came into being. And then on the other side of the aisle, we have the theory of creation. One group says things were formed over millions and billions of years, and another group says God created all things. These are both theories. They're not observable, they're not repeatable, it's not verifiable. So let's take your theory and let's look at the evidence that appears on the earth, and let's take the other theory and look at the evidence, and let's see which theory is supported by the physical evidence of what we see on the earth. So before I can get into a discussion with someone about evolution and creation, we first have to set the parameters that evolution is no more science than creation theory is. It is a theory, and that's all it is. There's no facts supporting evolution, and that is the biggest eye-opening thing that I can probably tell you. It's accepted as fact because people simply don't want to acknowledge God as creator. I'm going to tell you why the theory of evolution is so popular. Because it's the only alternative to acknowledging that there is a creator. In other words, if there is a creator, God, and he made the universe and he made us, then guess what? He makes the rules. But because man is naturally rebellious against God and we want to do what we want to do, we're willing to go out and find a theory that is so crazy and has no evidence to support it and is so weak in its foundation, but we'll believe it in order to not believe that God created us. I can give you so many examples, it would take hours of the discussion. Now, I have personally felt that this is the biggest propaganda machine in the world, this concept of evolution. So I have spent hours upon hours, many, many years studying creation and evolution. I have multiple books on my desk that support evolution. I have obviously multiple books that support creation. I look at both sides of the issue, and it is so apparent and clear. I'll tell you one thing I did before. I was chaplain for a police department in Colorado, and we were building a brand new courthouse and police department. And so as the chaplain, our lieutenant chief, who was second in command over the police department, was basically an atheist. Good guy. We'd always, I always had fun with him, and just a wonderful guy. Been sheriff now for many, many years in that area. And I went into his office one day. We had just broke ground on the new police department and courthouse. I think 3 days earlier. They had all the guys out there with the helmets on. They had all the people with the golden shovels. They had the ribbon cutting thing, and everybody was digging in the ground, taking their photo op, and it was in the paper and all over the internet. Hey, the new building's going to get built. And I walked in and I sat down in the chair in front of the lieutenant chief, and I said, "You're not going to believe what happened." And he goes, "What are you talking about?" I said, "The building, the new police station is already finished." And he said, "What?" I said, "You didn't hear?" He goes, "What is wrong with you?" I said, listen, they took all the materials that they knew would be required for the building, from electrical wiring to all the ductwork for the HVAC system, to all the roofing, all the floor tiles, all the electrical pipes, all the bricks for the outside, all the windows, all the glass, all the insulation. Just go about naming what it takes to build a 4-story building with a jail on the top and a courthouse in it and a police station in it. And everything I told him was piled up into a pile on the job site. They then took some nitroglycerin and some dynamite, and they blew that thing up, and you would not believe it, but instantly an entire perfect building was formed. I said, "Go out, take a look at it." Now, by this time, he's laughing at me, and he's got this big smirk on his face. He goes, okay, what's your point? What's your point? I said, "Well, you don't believe that can happen?" He goes, "Okay, what's your point?" He wouldn't even answer me because he knew how absolutely ridiculous and absurd it was. And I said, well, that's how you believe the universe came into existence. You believe that the earth is 23.5 degrees on a perfect tilt, not too close to the sun, not too far to sustain life. But you believe all these planets are organized in the universe, and the sun and everything just happened in a massive explosion. I said, if it could do the universe, why can't we do it in this building right here? And he just stood there stunned and looking at me and really didn't have anything to say. But I would ask that question to you. Have we ever seen anything in the history of the universe, and does that make any type of science or logical sense that you can explode something and then it's going to come into order, into perfect unity or organization? So we look at the human body, which is still the most complex organism to ever exist. Doctors still cannot tell you how the eye sees. Scientists have no idea how communication is relayed from the eye into the brain to that we actually have sight and can see, but yet we think that happened because of some evolution where there's no knowledge or no wisdom or no outside influence whatsoever, even though that whole concept absolutely defies the second law of thermodynamics. The second law of thermodynamics says that anything left to itself will move into randomness or chaos or deterioration. So in other words, if you're in a building right now and you leave that building and come back in 100 years, is it going to be in better shape or in worse shape? It's obviously going to be in worse shape. But evolution says things get more and more complex and more sophisticated with no outside influence whatsoever, even though that is not observed in anything in world history, and it goes against all logic and all common sense and all things that are observable. A law is a law. It means it doesn't change. It never varies. So there's never and will never be anything observed where something without outside influence gets more complicated or gets more complex. But that's what the theory of evolution says. There are so many flaws in this theory. It's quite remarkable. I just want to tell you a few things about evolution. Non-living chemicals gave rise to living matter. Okay, non-living chemicals gave rise to living material. Single-celled organism then gave rise to multiple-celled organisms. Invertebrates, which have no backbones or spinal column, gave rise to the vertebrates. Fish gave rise to amphibians. For example, frogs began life in the water, and then somehow they developed, tadpoles developed gills and later lungs, and now they are cold-blooded and scaleless. And so amphibians evolved into reptiles. The reptiles, or the snakes, the lizards, the turtles, the crocodiles, the dinosaurs, all the cold-blooded vertebrates. And then the reptiles formed into birds, and then mammals, and then eventually human beings. There is not enough faith that I can conceive in order to believe this concept. Nothing in the universe has been seen or observed that would allow this type of concept to occur. I am so disappointed in so many people who don't ask questions again. I've talked to you about asking questions. If there's a painting on the wall and you walk up, that painting is speaking to you. That painting is telling you all kinds of information. When you see a painting on the wall, number one, you know without a shadow of a doubt there's a painter. We would never imagine that that painting can come into existence on its own. Nobody would. Not even the staunchest atheist would believe that. But yet something so much more complex than a painting, a human being, for example, we think happened by random chance and evolution. There is a designer. He is God Almighty. He made you with a specific purpose. You are made in the image of God. It is His intention that you would have an intimate relationship with Him. Listen, I could actually talk about this for hours. I could direct you to plethora of information. I could guide you, but first of all, you have to understand that you are uniquely and wonderfully made by a Creator who cares deeply about each one of His creations. And He is wanting every one of us to be drawn closer to Him to understand our true purpose on this earth. Evolution is an absolute joke. I've been studying this for decades. Listen, I'm just a normal golf pro guy. I don't have all the degrees, but I was talking one time to a guy who had a PhD in biology at the gym and actually taught evolution at a local university. And he walked away from me because he could not answer my questions. He realized that he had no answers to the questions I asked him, and it is amazing how much propaganda is espoused at universities and high schools and colleges and on through the media and everywhere you listen to mental golf. And I love to listen to mental golf, and I love to read books about performance, but they always go back to the fact, well, our brain works this way because we were hunter and gatherers, and back when we were caveman. No, your brain works that way because God made it to work that way. You're never going to figure out how the brain truly operates and what is really happening and get a proper perspective if you think that we evolve from some ape-like being who came out of some primordial soup, which all began because of an explosion in the universe 5.4 billion years ago. The reason they keep making this billions of years, it used to be it was 100 million, then it was 400 million, and then it was 2 billion, and now it's 5.4 billion, and it's got to be longer because they say evolution is so slow you can't see it happening. And so I'm over here where if it's so slow you can't see it happening, how can you say it's happening? But because there's no evidence to support their theory, they continue to go further and further and further back. So I challenge anybody, if you want to send me an email, a text, and show me some actual evidence. Don't tell me about the Peking man and the Java man and the Neanderthal man. Every single one of those have been proven to be a complete hoax. There's never been a missing link attaching one species to another. Matter of fact, that's why a dog cannot breed with a cat. A cat can't breed with a horse, and a horse can't breed with a cow because the Bible said God made them after their kind. But yet if evolution was true, we would have millions upon millions of interconnecting species, which will allow all of us animals to connect. But we don't have even one. Rest assured, creation by an intelligent being is the only answer to the question of how we came into being. Our God made us. He formed us by hand. It says we are formed from the dust of the ground, and He breathed into our nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. God did that for you and for me, and He made us to have that relationship with Him and to express His image on this earth, to express his character and his nature and to glorify him in our lives. Probably can tell I'm a little bit passionate about the subject, and I'm passionate probably because I hate to see so much false things being accepted as true. I've told you before, my epitaph I want on my tomb, my marker when I leave this earth is that just 3 words: seeker of truth. I am out to seek truth. I want to know the truth. I want to understand the truth, and I'll continue to ask questions as long as I'm living, because I'm seeking to know more and more about my God, who is the truth. Again, contact me if you'd like more information, if you'd like to start a dialogue. I'd love to chat with you through email, through text, if you have questions on the largest propaganda that's ever been perpetrated on the human population. And it's the false theory of evolution, as if it was factual science. This is Scott Weiss, PGA professional, Christian minister. Glad to take you on this journey through the God and Golf podcast, where Jesus is always first. Hope you have a great summer. Hope somehow these podcasts are helping you grow closer to Jesus and maybe helping you improve your golf game. So until next time, may God bless you.